Sorters. What makes better sorting performance? What ensures high stability and reliability regardless of 1 unit or 10,000 units? Quality is all. Mayer's Smart Factory is built for production of color sorters and dental CBCT. The factory has completed its first phase construction and is the most advanced production base in the industry. Mayer Smart Factory started construction in March 2018 with a construction area of nearly 70,000 square meters and a total investment of nearly $45 million. It takes full consideration of resource conservation, environmental protection, and employee health and safety before designing. The factory takes a multi-layer framed corridor structure, making full use of natural ventilation and lighting. Also, it adopts first-class energy-saving facilities and environmental-friendly materials, making it a true green factory. With the construction concept of first-class equipment and technology for first-class products, Mayer's Smart Factory has built over 10 advanced production lines, including the flexible automated production line of dental CBCT, the color sorter assembly line, automatic circuit board SMT production line, unmanned maglev ejector production line, electrical box and sorting box assembly line, which feature high quality, high efficiency, and environmental protection. Mayer's Smart Factory delivers a giant leap in stability and reliability. Also, quality of Mayer products is fully upgraded, and equipment maintenance costs are effectively reduced. That makes customers worry-free, totally. Quality is all. Mayer is constantly striving towards the goal of, no matter it is to produce 1 unit or 10,000 units, the quality is consistent. In addition, Mayer's Smart Factory has reduced material waste from the source for production and become more environmentally friendly, fulfilling Mayer's commitment to environmental protection. Also, Mayer's Smart Factory is an important part of Green Mayer, which advocates green design, green production, and green management, and gradually realizes the harmony between human and nature, and the harmony between enterprise and society. Mayer's Smart Factory is a big step in intelligent manufacturing, which guided by Mayer core values of pursuing quality and serving customers. Another intelligent coating sheet metal production base covering an area of 15 acres and a total investment of $55 million is also under construction. All we do is for product quality. Quality is all.
Fitting Cashew is an innovative program aimed at strengthening and growing the Beninese cashew sector. Its goal is to create a more productive, competitive, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth engine for the people of Benin. It's being funded by the USDA and is being implemented by TechnoServe and our partners at CRS. Over 8 years, Benin Cashew will increase the yields and incomes of more than 49,000 smallholder farmers, triple Benin's domestic processing capacity, create more than 3,400 jobs, most of which will be held by women, and will position the entire sector for continued growth long after the project ends.
TechnoServe travaille avec des hommes et des femmes pour bâtir des fermes et des entreprises compétitives qui contribuent à la réduction de la pauvreté, à l'augmentation de la résilience des bénéficiaires et de leur communauté. Nous restons convaincus que la participation pleine et entière des femmes et des filles permet de maximiser la croissance économique inclusive pour un développement généralisé. Au sein de la production agricole et notamment dans la filière cajou, bien que présentes, les femmes sont confrontées à des difficultés en ce qui concerne l'accès aux facteurs de production, notamment la terre, les ressources financières, la technologie et les formations. Au début du projet Bénin Cajou, la participation des femmes était d'environ 20,57%. À fin décembre 2020, ce taux est passé à 34,67% au sein de la production et à 39% au sein du projet. L'objectif étant d'atteindre au moins 40% de participation des femmes. Pour atteindre ce résultat, nous avons mis en place un dispositif institutionnel avec tous les partenaires du projet pour intégrer le genre au sein de toutes les activités de ce projet. Nous avons un dispositif basé sur des points focaux genre qui ont reçu des formations sur différentes techniques, différentes thématiques. Nous avons mené aussi un plaidoyer pour la modification des tests statutaires des fêtières des producteurs de cajou afin d'alléger les conditions d'accès des femmes aux coopératives. Et nous avons pu avoir une femme présidente du conseil d'administration de la fêtière des producteurs d'Anacad et une femme présidente du conseil de surveillance de cette même organisation, ce qui est une première au Bénin au sein de la filière Anacad.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes, surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'Anacad du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
J'ai constaté qu'avec cette formation, la femme a un grand rôle à jouer pour l'émancipation et la prospérité bien partagée qu'à l'intérieur, qu'à l'extérieur au sein du foyer. Grâce à cette même formation, la population, mais la communauté a un regard craintif en nous. Ils nous copient, ils voient la manière dont nous vivons avec mon épouse. Grâce à cette formation, nous avons pu réaliser beaucoup de choses.
Cette formation que nous avons eue sur le champ nous a réveillés par rapport à la femme, parce que dans le maillon production, on a constaté que les femmes n'ont pas assez à la tête, donc du coup, elles sont marginalisées. Donc sur le terrain, nous voyons à ce que les femmes soient prises en compte. Et comme le projet le recommande 40% de femmes, il faut dire que ce n'est pas facile. 40% des femmes, dans tout ce que nous faisons, on doit pouvoir toucher au moins 40% de femmes.
Investissez dans les filières coton et anacarde. Créez de la valeur ajoutée et contribuez à la lutte contre la pauvreté en milieu rural. Les filières coton et anacarde ivoiriennes, ce sont un potentiel de production de plus de 600 000 tonnes de coton-graine, 258 000 tonnes de fibres de coton, une position de premier producteur et premier exportateur mondial de noix brutes de cajou, un potentiel d'installation de plus de 100 unités de transformation de noix brutes de cajou d'une capacité de 5 000 tonnes, un marché d'intrants coton de plus de 60 milliards de francs CFA par campagne agricole, plus du quart de la production mondiale et près de la moitié de l'offre mondiale de noix brutes de cajou, un immense potentiel de création d'emplois et de richesses.
Get your copy of the ACA Cashew Barometer. To access diverse industry data like RCN statistics comprising land area, yield data, RCN production volumes, CFR and farm gate prices, volumes of traded RCN. You can also have kernel statistics such as volumes of raw cashew nuts processed, quantities of kernels traded, and FOB prices. With the premium edition, you can view your chart in so many ways using Excel filters. In addition to this, you also have access to cashew heat and policy maps covering RCN policies in different cashew producing countries, processing policies, and map of African producers and beyond. Get your copy now of the ACA Cashew Barometer.
Thelma. I'm the CEO of Ivoirienne de Noix de Cajou. Today, cashews are faceless, and our aim is to give cashews an identity. More than 40% of raw nuts in the world are produced in Ivory Coast, and we believe the cashew identity should be African. So we set up this factory to connect the value chain between the farmers and the consumers. The farmers are fragmented and the consumers are disconnected, and we are here as the processor to connect the two and tell you the story. And this is the story about creating jobs for women and youth in a country that has grown cashews historically but not processed.
Je m'appelle Amani Loukou Charlotte. Mon village c'est Djedou en Ouzé. J'ai 7 enfants. C'est champ d'Anakat là je prends pour faire école de mes enfants.
Blame blue akisi Veronique. Wakamasi kai. Nkranya ba mu serike mi. Nya mi no are dike ba. Nkranya ya are. Itiga wakamanya suwebo. Iko pia iko kranga we gwa kronsuwa. Le blame e o Djedou anze.
Hello, my name is Luis Tito. I am plant manager of EN Cashew. We are focused to make the best quality with the best product, especially for you. We are nuts about cashew.
My name is Ashta Sherif, a quality director at EN Cashew, a BRC certified company in Ivory Coast. My team and I are working every day to ensure a safe product for you and healthy environment for all of our employees.
What do you care most when buying color sorters? What makes better sorting performance? What ensures high stability and reliability regardless of 1 unit or 10,000 units? Quality is all. Mayer's Smart Factory is built for production of color sorters and dental CBCT. The factory has completed its first phase construction and is the most advanced production base in the industry. Mayer Smart Factory started construction in March 2018 with a construction area of nearly 70,000 square meters and a total investment of nearly $45 million. It takes full consideration of resource conservation, environmental protection, and employee health and safety before designing. The factory takes a multi-layer framed corridor structure, making full use of natural ventilation and lighting. Also, it adopts first-class energy-saving facilities and environmental-friendly materials, making it a true green factory. With the construction concept of first-class equipment and technology for first-class products, Mayer Smart Factory has built over 10 advanced production lines, including the flexible automated production line of dental CBCT, the color sorter assembly line, automatic circuit board SMT production line, unmanned maglev ejector production line, electrical box and sorting box assembly line, which feature high quality, high efficiency, and environmental protection. Mayer Smart Factory delivers a giant leap in stability and reliability. Also, quality of Mayer products is fully upgraded, and equipment maintenance costs are effectively reduced. That makes customers worry-free totally. Quality is all. Mayer is constantly striving towards the goal of, no matter it is to produce 1 unit or 10,000 units, the quality is consistent. In addition, Mayer's Smart Factory has reduced material waste from the source for production and become more environmentally friendly, fulfilling Mayer's commitment to environmental protection. Also, Mayer Smart Factory is an important part of Green Mayer, which advocates green design, green production, and green management, and gradually realizes the harmony between human and nature, and the harmony between enterprise and society. Mayer Smart Factory is a big step in intelligent manufacturing, which guided by Mayer core values of pursuing quality and serving customers. Another intelligent coating sheet metal production base covering an area of 15 acres and a total investment of $55 million is also under construction. All we do is for product quality. Quality is all.
Spinning Cashew is an innovative program aimed at strengthening and growing the Beninese cashew sector. Its goal is to create a more productive, competitive, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth engine for the people of Benin. It's being funded by the USDA and is being implemented by TechnoServe and our partners at CRS. Over 8 years, Spinning Cashew will increase the yields and incomes of more than 49,000 smallholder farmers, triple Benin's domestic processing capacity, create more than 3,400 jobs, most of which will be held by women, and will position the entire sector for continued growth long after the project ends.
Technoserve travaille avec des hommes et des femmes pour bâtir des fermes et des entreprises compétitives qui contribuent à la réduction de la pauvreté, à l'augmentation de la résilience des bénéficiaires et de leur communauté. Nous restons convaincus que la participation pleine et entière des femmes et des filles permet de maximiser la croissance économique inclusive pour un développement généralisé. Au sein de la production agricole et notamment dans la filière cajou, bien que présentes, les femmes sont confrontées à des difficultés en ce qui concerne l'accès aux facteurs de production, notamment la terre, les ressources financières, la technologie et les formations. Au début du projet Bénin Cajou, la participation des femmes était d'environ 20,57%. À fin décembre 2020, ce taux est passé à 34,67% au sein de la production et à 39% au sein du projet. L'objectif étant d'atteindre au moins 40% de participation des femmes. Pour atteindre ce résultat, nous avons mis en place un dispositif institutionnel avec tous les partenaires du projet pour intégrer le genre au sein de toutes les activités de ce projet. Nous avons un dispositif basé sur des points focaux genre qui ont reçu des formations sur différentes techniques, différentes thématiques. Nous avons mené aussi un plaidoyer pour la modification des tests statutaires des fêtières, des producteurs de cajou afin d'alléger les conditions d'accès des femmes aux coopératives. Et nous avons pu avoir une femme présidente du conseil d'administration de la fêtière des producteurs d'anacarde et une femme présidente du conseil de surveillance de cette même organisation, ce qui est une première au Bénin au sein de la filière anacarde.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes, surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
J'ai constaté qu'avec cette formation, la femme a un grand rôle à jouer pour l'émancipation et la prospérité, bien partagée qu'à l'intérieur, qu'à l'extérieur, au sein du foyer. Grâce à cette même formation, la population, mais la communauté a un regard craintif en nous. Ils nous copient, ils voient la manière dont nous vivons avec mon épouse. Grâce à cette formation, nous avons pu réaliser beaucoup de choses.
Cette formation que nous avons eue sur le genre nous a réveillés par rapport à la femme, parce que dans le maillon production, on a constaté que les femmes n'ont pas accès à la terre, donc du coup, elles sont marginalisées. Donc sur le terrain, nous voyons à ce que les femmes sont prises en compte. Et comme le projet le recommande 40% de femmes, il faut dire que ce n'est pas facile. 40% des femmes, dans tout ce que nous faisons, on doit pouvoir toucher au moins 40% de femmes.
Investissez dans les filières coton et anacarde. Créez de la valeur ajoutée et contribuez à la lutte contre la pauvreté en milieu rural. Les filières coton et anacarde ivoiriennes, ce sont un potentiel de production de plus de 600 000 tonnes de coton graines, 258 000 tonnes de fibres de coton, une position de premier producteur et premier exportateur mondial de noix brutes de cajou, un potentiel d'installation de plus de 100 unités de transformation de noix brutes de cajou d'une capacité de 5 000 tonnes, un marché d'intrants coton de plus de 60 milliards de francs CFA par campagne agricole, plus du quart de la production mondiale et près de la moitié de l'offre mondiale de noix brutes de cajou, un immense potentiel de création d'emplois et de richesses.
Get your copy of the ACA Cashew Barometer. To access diverse industry data like RCN statistics comprising land area, yield data, RCN production volumes, CFR and farm gate prices, volumes of traded RCN. You can also have kernel statistics such as volumes of raw cashew nuts processed, quantities of kernels traded, and FOB prices. With the premium edition, you can view your chart in so many ways using Excel filters. In addition to this, you also have access to cashew heat and policy maps covering RCN policies in different cashew producing countries, processing policies, and map of African producers and beyond. Get your copy now of the ACA Cashew Barometer.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to everyone for today's session, which is on markets in Tanzania. So today we'll be having Jim Fitzpatrick as his video on. I haven't seen you in a while, Jim. Pleasure to have you on. And
morning,
then
Ernest.
Yes, good morning. Jim will also be hosting the Cashew Board of Tanzania head, who will also be taking us through the issues in Tanzania after Jim's presentation. So at this point, let me also mention that I am moderating, hosting, let's say, this with the assistance of Blessing Okam, Miss Blessing Okam, who had also held the fort in the last fortnight. So today, as I said, it's on markets in Tanzania, and we like to also inform you that you will have the time to come in with your questions, and please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom, to put in your questions, even right from the word go. If you want to speak or intervene in any other form, you can also use the raise hand functionality. Otherwise, please use the box for networking. So at this stage, Blessing, is there something else? Maybe appreciation of our sponsors also.
Yes, thank you very much, Ernest. Just before Jim will start, we'd like to acknowledge our partners and sponsors. We have Cashew Info, GIZ.com Cashew, CNFA Pro Cashew, Technosoft Benny Cashew, SNI, Intersnack, and of course our participants who join us every fortnight. Thank you very much for joining us. Without wasting much time, Ernest, with your permission, I'd like to invite Jim to go on with today's session.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Thank you, Blessing. Thank you, Ernest. It's nice to be with you again. As usual this morning, we're going to start by talking about markets. And then, as Ernest has told us, we're going to talk about a little bit about Tanzania. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Dr. Francis Alfred as to how things are going in Tanzania. Let me add my encouragement to you to get involved. If you have any talking points, whether related to this or to other aspects of cashews, feel free. Participation makes it better. So join in if you would like, using the chat. Come and talk to us if you like. We'd be delighted to hear from you. So let's see what are the talking points in the market over the past 2 weeks. It has actually been a relatively quiet 2 weeks, perhaps with the exception of Tanzania, where the auction has been ongoing. We've seen the market drift off a little. Lack of buyers, I suppose, is the main thing, and later on I'll talk about why that might be. However, the sellers are not really pushing too aggressively. We see a lot of talk from sellers, but actually when you look at it, the market has drifted down. If we take 320s from Vietnam, the market has drifted down a few cents. There isn't really aggressive forward selling. There is some, mostly out as far as February. In other words, not really a lot of new crop selling. Perhaps there are one or two traders out there maybe making forward sales. Well, I salute their bravery and worry about their future at these prices. Meantime, in West Africa, the qualified sellers, and I stress qualified processors, are making prices approaching $3.50. And what's noticeable is that that premium over prices in Vietnam right now is greater than the additional freight cost. So what explains that would be the timing, the fact that you can get your cashew kernels delivered into Western markets fairly quickly still from West Africa compared to the voyage time from any Asian country at the moment. And we know why that is. That's all part of this freight crisis that we've seen, the incredible rise in rates, as we've talked about on this event before. The not only increase in rates, and I mean, an increase in rates is important, although perhaps less important in a high-value product like cashew kernels than it is in some of the lower-value commodities. Nonetheless, long voyages, uncertainty as to the availability of equipment, high prices, all are taking their toll. And I wonder if this is the reason why cashew kernels prices have not firmed up. There's no way to know, of course. And there's no real way to predict when this will end. Certainly, if we look at retailers, forwarders, shipping lines, and their predictions, there's very little prospect of this changing before the middle of next year. And I think that's probably optimistic. And it could well be could well be that the low freight rates of the past are gone for good. I don't see that as a threat to cashews particularly, but it is something that we have to bear in mind. Demand and exports. Well, we can probably say that buyers in those countries that buy forward, buyers are well covered. So generally we see European buyers, US buyers, North American buyers generally tend to buy forward and to cover themselves. In India, the market is much more a spot trade market. In China, the market is much more prompt or spot market. So if we look at about 40% of the world cashew demand that's covered by the European Union and North America, that market is pretty well covered right now. Question mark would be, is it covered until the Northern Hemisphere new crop? Good question. I think probably it's covered until the harvest period. But if we take the harvest plus the time taken to get to Vietnam for the raw cashew nuts, plus the time taken to process them and ship them back, you would wonder if some buying is not going to come in over the next few months. You would probably expect that maybe for the second quarter. In India, I'm told that demand is normal to good, nothing too exciting in India. There's a lot of disruption in the Indian imported nuts trade, particularly almonds, walnuts to a lesser extent. And I think that maybe that could eventually lead to a flurry of demand as we come up to the festival season, Diwali, and the covering that follows usually after that as people restock a little. So one thing that does, I think, need to be borne in mind is that many buyers, and I'm talking now about buyers who tend to buy forward, over the course of the pandemic period, they may well have shortened their cover periods. In other words, that they don't buy as far forward as they used to. Now, once upon a time, it was common to cover a year forward. It was common for retailers to have 1 year or even longer contracts with roasters. And that is changing a little. What we have seen, on the other hand, is we have seen buyers in this 2021 season, they've shipped early and they've shipped a lot in order to make sure that they're covered. And we'll have a look at that as we go on in the conversation. In the RCN market, we've certainly seen auction prices, as you would expect in Tanzania, drift off a little over the last 3 weeks. That's absolutely what you'd expect. It happens almost every year, starts high and tends to drift down. Now we see international prices easing too. We see the resellers' offers for Ivorian cashew nuts down by $20 to $30. We know that there's a fairly good stock at destination, particularly Vietnam. And we also know that these current RCN prices, depending on the quality of the product, is a really tight calculation. You know, if you're looking at 320s, around $3.10 in the export markets, and you're looking at Ivorian 46, 48 pounds maybe, offered 13.20, 13.30, that's a really difficult calculation. Particularly when you see Tanzanian raw cashew nuts, which are much higher quality, obviously coming onto the market now, fresh, with a cost price in the region of $1,300. And obviously people have got to make money as well, and there's a lot of expenses to be paid. But when you look at that, you would start to think that maybe there's an easing of raw cashew nut prices to come. Although not too many buyers, so how it happens remains to be seen. Let's talk about price, as we always do. And this is the price chart. This is the typical price chart that I've been using 5 years. And if we look at it and we look at the trend, so we've clearly seen a downward trend. Not at all surprising given the high prices we saw back in early 2017. If we look at this, we'll see lately the market has been above the trend. Normally that might suggest that prices are on their way up. It has been sustainably above the trend for most of this year. And since July, the market has been relatively steady in a range. If we look at the gaps between brokens and 320s. We see that that's having recovered in the early part of the year from this period of really low brokens prices. Having recovered, it's remained relatively stable now since early July. So July, August, September, and all the way through October. So what we see is a market that's, to me, looks as if it should be set to move up. But of course, for markets to move, you need buyers and sellers. Let's have a look at some of the other indicators. So we are now on or around the 2-year average, just slightly above the 2-year average. Makes 320s look like pretty good value compared to what we've seen in the last 3 years, and very good value if we look at the average over the last 5 years. So we know that consumption has been very healthy over the past 5 years, even through the pandemic, even through the high prices of 2017, and now we're still below those levels. And if we take out, I like to take out the extremes. So if we take out what I consider the lunacy of April and May 2017, when prices hit 525, and if we take out the car crash of last year, where the market was just dropped off by 25 cents. It actually happened twice last year. The market was dropped off about 25 cents a pound. Once in February, March, panic as the pandemic became clear. And then again later on in the year, during August, the market was pushed down again. Strange, surprising that would happen. There's not much conviction among sellers. I don't think that's likely now. There's not much conviction among sellers in Vietnam, particularly, but we should bear in mind that Vietnamese processors did crash the market twice last year. So literally watch this carefully. Anything is possible. So looking at the market today, to put this in perspective, we're just about 2% above the 2-year average, but we're 16% below the 5-year average. Let's have another look. Let's look a little bit maybe more closely about this and what's the likely impact of pricing on demand. So this is a chart that shows the annual progression month by month of 320 prices FOB. So this is export 320. So for the most part, this is Vietnamese 320s. It doesn't take into account the higher prices taken and paid in Africa over the last 6 months. And if we look at 2021, what we've seen is relatively stable market in a range. We see prices generally finding their way up through to September, and then post or release of lockdown in Vietnam, the market started to crash down again. Difficult to explain that. People mentioned cash flow. I don't know about that, but they also mentioned that a lot of small factories are closed, which you would expect would steady prices. So it's a difficult one to understand exactly why prices came down. There's no justification in demand. If we look at buyers and buyers of kernels in particular internationally, right now what they've got, given that we've seen prices below, this is a 5-year average again, and we're looking at that, we're below the 5-year average for 3 straight years and way below it for most of that time. And we were below it in 2019. Prior to the pandemic, the market was probably set to move up during the early part of 2020. The impact of the pandemic and prices fell away, mostly I think based on the uncertainty. No one knew what would happen, what might happen, and the market fell away. And it's been recovering from that during 2021. And this latest blip is something that we'll have to see how that works out. It's quite difficult to understand why that might happen. So over those 3 years, we've been in a range of about plus or minus 10%, if we take the mean point. and the average over the period were about plus or minus 10%. That for cashews is a very stable period of prices. If we look at the longer term, if you want to take a step back and have a look at prices over 20 years, which when you look at that chart, it might make you feel a little bit queasy. It certainly does me. But if you look at the period, the last big boom in prices, we had a 50% upward and eventually downward movement in prices. So that's remarkable volatility. That was 2016, 17, and then during 2018, we saw the crash in prices. And if we compare that to the period preceding that boom in prices, this period here, 2011, 12, well, actually 12, 13, 14, 15 or thereabouts, so a period of relative stable prices. And we compare it to the last 3 years, there's really a striking comparison. So that period of price stability compares with the recent period of price stability, albeit we have to accept that those were different times. This was before the pandemic. This was before the freight crisis that we've seen. So it is a little bit different, but probably not different in terms of consumer behavior. If anything, consumer behavior is likely to be more positive toward cashews now than it was then. And if we look at what happened then with 3 years of price stability, we got the highest growth rates. So these are year-on-year growth rates in cashew demand. And if we look in India, North America, Europe, over that period, 2013, indeed 2012, 13, 14, and tailing away in 15, we've seen the fastest growth in demand that we've ever seen. Even faster than the remarkable events of 19 and 20, which we saw pre-pandemic and as the pandemic impact struck. So this is an indicator to my mind that we've got a number of factors going on here that could be very positive for demand. Firstly, we have our roasters, particularly those that buy forward, dealing with low-cost deliveries right now, contracts that they've bought on or about the current market price. They must be low-cost deliveries because the market's been relatively low for the past 3 years. They're really quite well covered up to the first quarter of next year, but we don't know beyond that. And probably they're not that well covered beyond that, and they need to come into the market. And maybe they're right to wait for the harvest to buy. That would seem to make some sense too. We've got conditions of relative price stability over 3 years, which can lead to strong growth. And we've got these very positive demand trends. So the trends of healthy eating, convenience, the trend toward vegetable proteins, all of these factors and many more are contributing to improved demand. And we're looking now at the longer term, improved demand for edible nuts generally. I was at the Anuga Fair, I may have mentioned it 2 weeks ago. At Anuga, you could see anyone in the nuts business was busy. It wasn't a particularly busy trade fair for obvious reasons, but anyone in the nuts business was really busy, whether it was almonds, cashews, walnuts, snack foods, whatever it was. There's a lot of interest in these products. And therefore, I'm coming to the conclusion that we may well see after the pandemic, rather than a settling down in demand growth, we might actually see another growth spurt. And I would not be at all surprised. I would never predict rates of 20% or even 22% as we saw in 2013 and 14. But I do think we will see strong growth in demand. Are we ready for that? Who knows? Times of real uncertainty. Continuing on the subject of demand, let's just step back to the current situation. So we're looking at Vietnam. Now we know Vietnam supplies about 90% of North American imports and somewhere in around 82% of European imports. So it's really important. And during 2021, we've seen quite a positive trend in Vietnamese imports, particularly mid-year. We've seen spikes in imports. Let's put some perspective on that and compare 2021 in red with 2020, which itself was a record year, and 2019, which was at the time a record year, but let's say a more normal year because obviously pre-pandemic. Looking at 2021, we see a real mid-year surge in exports. Looking at May, June, July, after a relatively calm start. I mean, early in the year, you can see particularly February followed a similar pattern to 2019 where exports were down. We know why that is. That's a time when Vietnamese factories are closed for the holidays and for maintenance. Then it spiked up in 2020 following a really strong early part of the season, March and April. It stayed relatively stable and then caught up again toward the end of the year. But this year, we've seen something a little bit different. We see remarkable figures for Vietnamese exports. And this is an indicator of strong demand, but it's also an indicator of what might happen over the next 3 months. So let's have a little look at that and see how demand looks right now. So what I did was I had a look at imports to the US and to Europe, which we know, but we only know until the end of August. Those figures are not yet published. So we looked at the shipments from Vietnam. Now we tried to match the exports with the likely imports towards the end of the year. Now we have to be careful with this because clearly at the moment, shipments that are made in July, which you would normally expect to arrive end of August, first half September, they're not going to arrive end of August, first half September. They're much later. And this is one of the reasons why we see much higher shipments. So if we look at shipments during July, August and September, we see very high shipments. So the US, almost 18,000 tons. Let's compare that to the imports, let's say, of September of last year, just over 15,000 tons. And if we look closely at the US market, what we're seeing is what I did was I compared the highest ever October, which was last October, the highest ever November, which was 2016, and the highest ever December imports. And I compared those to shipments during July, August, and September. So rather than taking a 45-day transit, I took, let's say, a 100-day transit, just to be careful. And the conclusion is that at the end of August, US imports were up 7.7% on the year. Now, bear in mind, that's up on the all-time record year. This is not up on a poor year. This is way ahead. And when we look at it, it does seem that the US is going to maintain that and probably exceed that. So we have July shipments, 18,000 approximately, compared to September imports in 2020 or 2019, way ahead. We look at August exports from Vietnam and compare that to what would normally be the import position, October, again, about 1,000 tons ahead. And we look at September, 15,500 tons, again, way ahead of what you would normally expect in either November or December. And we can take Vietnam as a very good indicator for the US imports because Vietnam has supplied, I think last year it was 89%, and this year it is just running over 90% of the imports into North America. If we look at these two markets, by the way, they're very important markets. They cover between them about 40% of world demand. So these two markets together are about 40%. India is around about 38% by my calculations. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. So these two markets are about the same as India. And between them, we're talking about covering approximately 80% of world demand. So we can get a very good idea of where things are going. So it looks on what we know, that US imports will finish the year. I wouldn't be surprised if they were up by 9%, but they'll certainly be up by 7% plus. If we look at the European Union, we see that in Europe, we again, comparing shipments for July, August, and September with the highest ever imports for October, November, and December. And again, we see a situation where it's a roundabout par. So Europe at the end of August was up by about, well, just less than 0.5%. European imports were strong. If you compare European imports to 2019 or 2018, you'd say very strong. But if you compare them to last year, which was a remarkable year, you'd just say, yeah, it's amazing that Europe has maintained its import level during 2021. What we see in Europe is that shipments are slightly up. We don't see the same impact as in the United States. Now, that could be because Europeans were able to maybe rely on a slightly shorter transit period and that their stocking took place slightly later. The import figures would tend to suggest that there was a slight delay in action from European buyers compared to Americans, simply because the transit time is still a little bit lower. So looking at this, I think on the one hand, we'll see very strong demand. We'll see the US and Europe probably hit all-time records this year. That will, by the way, reestablish the United States as the world's largest importer compared to the European Union. But it also means, and the flip side of that is probably that shipments from Vietnam, exports from Vietnam, will probably calm down from October, November, December. I don't yet have October figures, but I think we'll see them calming down a little bit. It'll be very interesting to see those figures, because certainly there must be some concern with high levels of inventory and early shipments. There must be some concern amongst buyers that they would end up carrying inventory into next year. And of course, we're talking here about import figures. We're not talking about consumption. So it wouldn't take into account, for example, I think it's unlikely, but for example, if consumer demand was to fall away in the last quarter of the year. Overall, long-term prices, demand, there's absolutely nothing to make us think there's any problem on either right now. Cashew prices are attractive for buyers. Cashew prices are historically very interesting. If you bought today for a year forward, you'd more than likely be right. Who knows what will happen, of course, but that's what the numbers say to us. If we look at demand, very strong, and we should add in that Chinese imports, although it's been quiet lately, China is having a real surge in interest in cashew demand. Perhaps we should also mention that forecasts of the almond crop worldwide are down. There are difficulties with exports from Turkey on hazelnuts, California on almonds, California on walnuts. And these are products that may well, although they don't normally compete directly with each other, you might well see some impact on the demand for cashew nuts in certain countries. So perhaps in the Middle East, possibly in India, although it's a bit late for that, I think, and possibly in China. So I think overall, fairly positive situation as we look forward into 2022 and cashew demand. If we look at the crop situation, I don't see a great deal of change. I won't dwell on this for too long. The position in Tanzania still looks positive. We're fortunate enough to hear more about that shortly. Brazil looks about the same as we discussed before, about 11% down on last year. And Mozambique, we're hoping that we'll have a representative from Mozambique with us the next time, but certainly we'd like to get a little bit better idea of the realities of Mozambique. So before we go to our guest, I'd like to just give you a bit of background, a kind of a global picture on the Tanzanian cashew sector. And just in very general terms, over recent years, And the big trends in Tanzania have been, indeed, as they've been for a long time, high quality raw cashew nuts. Tanzania produces about 12% of the world's cashews, probably a little bit less last season, but generally around about 12%, making it the 6th in the world and 2nd in Africa. Tanzania is a southern hemisphere crop, as you know. There's a long history of processing going back to the 1970s. We're seeing increasing production. There has been a couple of blips, but we are definitely seeing a trend of increasing production in Tanzania, a very positive trend indeed. If you look at the red bars here, you can see where it's going and that it's an important producer in Africa. And we see an interesting system and operation in Tanzania, the auction system, which allows traceability of the product. It's a highly regulated sector, but it's a sector that's undergoing some very interesting and positive changes. There are probably only 3 cashew countries really that are undergoing strong regulatory change over the last 3 to 5 years. Cote d'Ivoire, where we've seen the introduction of a lot of subsidies, a lot of supports for the industry. Tanzania, where we've seen something of a rethink in the auction system. And Cambodia, where we see a new crop coming on. In Tanzania, we should recognize the tremendous work done on the development of new and strong varieties of cashew trees. We should recognize the fact that there's work being done to improve the distribution of inputs, and inputs are essential. Farm gate prices in Tanzania have been improving in recent years. There is a post-harvest infrastructure courtesy of the auction system, and there is regulation on exports and export quality, and there is some improvement on that. Probably the disappointing thing in Tanzania is that processing hasn't developed more. As we know, that's quite common across the continent. Looking at the crop history, we had a poorer crop last year, but again forecast to recover this year. We've seen the auction costs. These are my calculations, so they take them or leave them, but that's what I'm seeing. The cost somewhere around about $1,250, $1,300 cost in freight. That doesn't include exporters' costs, margins. So they've obviously got to make a profit, otherwise they wouldn't do it. We see offers around about $1,550 cost in freight for high quality Tanzanian raw nuts. And looking at last year, it started roughly where it started this year, around $1,575, and then it drifted away by the end of October. That might well happen based on the current cost at the auction. And this is roughly what we've seen in terms of tonnage. Based on the figures I've seen, and hopefully we'll get an update on this from the Acting Director General of the Cashew Board of Tanzania in a few moments, but we've seen a good progress on the crop, maybe a little bit less than was at the same time last year. That we shouldn't read too much into that at all. It might even be a positive factor. And we've seen prices at the auction, as they normally do, start high and drift down a little bit. And we can see that the last set of prices were above the October average. So you would say that prices at the auction are slightly above last year's level. So quite a positive outlook during the month of October for Tanzania, and the crop will go on throughout November and into December. So I'd like to now introduce our guest, Dr. Francis Alfred of the Cashew Board of Tanzania.
James, he just wrote to say he is having a little bit of internet challenges, but he is trying to rejoin again.
Okay.
Jim,
yeah.
in the absence of Dr. Francis Alfred, probably we could also start some questions that are already here for you.
Sure.
Very good. So if you look on the chart, we have a questioner, Bishi, who wants to know how much kernels are exported from Africa and whether imports are raising due to stock up inventory or customers' demand in North America.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the African share of imports, which is the flip side of exports, of course, into the European market and the American market, where they're mainly focused, still remains relatively low, around about 4%, somewhat lower in North America, maybe around 2.5%, 3% in North America. So we're looking at a very small market share at the moment. The reasons for that are historical, and it's only in the last 3-4 years that buyers are beginning to develop confidence in African processors. What we can certainly see is that the establishment of additional processing in Cote d'Ivoire particularly, but also in Ghana, also upgrades of factories in Benin. I see exports from Nigeria also increasing. So yes, I think the question, are the imports rising due to stocking up inventory or customers' demand in North America? I think the imports are rising for a number of reasons. First of all, I think at the moment, we see a position where there are a number of factories that have done a really good job. If you were with us just before we started, you will have seen some videos from Cashew processors doing a really good job. We see new processors with the right kind of certification and the right kind of approach that's making them qualified suppliers. And they're certainly taking more demand both in Europe and in the United States. We also see at the moment, let's say a little boost to that, given by the fact that the transit time from West Africa is just that bit less and that it's predictable. And this is, as I was saying during the discussion, this means that we're getting a situation where really African cashews make sense if you need to put something in your warehouse during 2021. And so I think in general, we can say that the trend is positive. I think that it is based on, as the questioner mentions, is it stocking up or is it underlying customer demand? I think it's both, but I think it's particularly underlying customer demand. And I think this will be a long-term trend.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think Francis Alfred.
Oh.
Yes. Please, can you show your video?
Yeah, I've already shown my video. Now you can see me.
Okay, very good. So you're welcome. And Jim, please take over.
Okay. Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you too?
Not too bad. So we wanted to talk to you about how things are in Tanzania this year. I've given you, I'm not sure if you were with us or not, I gave a kind of a global overview of the situation over recent years. And what we were interested in is how is the harvest progressing? We heard earlier estimates, some people were saying between 260 and 280,000 tons. Has that changed and how is the harvest progressing?
It has not changed, but there were some minor factor which might affect the production. We are projecting to produce 280,000 metric tons, but we might not be able to reach that because of the weather condition which affected the flowering of the trees. So we are uncertain if we will be able to reach the goal we had set before. So not certain, but we cannot say so much because we're in the 4th week of auctions. Maybe at the end of November, we'll be in a much better position to state the actual position of the production this season.
Okay, so we can still use 280, maybe plus or minus as a working figure.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, and what about the longer term? We've seen some great work in Tanzania on new varieties and on planting, and I see even some new areas. I see cashew trees being planted. What's your view on the long-term outlook for production in Tanzania?
Because currently most of the produce is coming from the southern part along the coast of Tanzania. But if we look on the next 3 to 4 years in future, we are seeing increased production in the central part of Tanzania and the western part of Tanzania. So after sometimes we are looking forward to increase the production, and the production will not be much centered in the southern part of Tanzania, but also in the northern part. But also we look at it as a good trend for us, because the crop in southern part of Tanzania, which covers around 5 regions, Mtwara, Lindi, Ruvuma, Coast region, and the Lindi. The season starts around October and it's end in February. But the northern part, the central part and the northern part of Tanzania, we are seeing that the cashew goes up to April, May. So because now we are looking on how to increase processing the country, so we are seeing that as a good venture for us, for local processors to be able to source raw materials for a longer duration as it is now. So we are going to put more effort now to distribute seeds and establish seedlings to increase the planting in the northern part and the central part of Tanzania. So we are seeing it as a way for us to reach our goal of producing 700,000 metric tons by 2025-2026.
That's a really ambitious target. It's also very interesting because you're looking there to address one of the biggest problems that processors have, which is stocking all year round. So if I understand it right, if production spreads north throughout the country, you could have a new crop, October, November, December, and then again, February, March, April.
Yeah.
That would be remarkable, wouldn't it? That would be really interesting from a processor's point of view. What about the auction? How is the auction progressing this year?
We are now in the 4th week of the auctions, and we saw the prices were less as compared to previous year. And one of the main reasons the buyers were complaining on the higher cost of shipping and the challenge of getting containers as a global issue, and that the prices has increased so much. And as you remember, initially we had said that all cashew from the southern part should go through Mtwara region, and the buyers could not be able to get ships which were coming to southern part of Tanzania to Mtwara port, and that were creating even more pressure on the prices in the auctions. So the government looked at it, and now we have opened for both ports to be used. So from the last Sunday now, the buyers can send either through Mtwara or through Dar es Salaam region. We did that purposely in order because we were seeing that we had a lot of cargo now in southern part and it was not getting out. So in order to give the space for the warehouses and the other places to store that RCN, we had to allow for the rest of the. So now the government has allowed also the some port to be used. So we hope that arrangement will assist to improve the prices in the auctions, because now the buyers are settled on the cost of transporting RCN, because they are saying that by transporting cashew through Mtwara port, the cost of production was increasing around 250 shillings to 300 shillings per kilogram. So that was creating a burden to a farmer because they were costing it to a farmer, and so they were issuing very low price. So we hope that after opening Dar es Salaam port, where transportation cost for a kilo is a bit less as compared to Mtwara, we hope there will be improvement in the prices starting from this week. So we are looking forward to look at what would be the changes after that government change in policy.
That's a positive development. So 250 shillings a kilo is about $110, $115 a ton, that's significant. That should make a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to move on to the subject of cashew processing in Tanzania. Tanzania has a lot of competitive advantages. I see the I see what I think are really positive changes that you've introduced. For example, the two-tier sourcing, allowing processors to work with local cooperatives. Are there new processing projects in the pipeline in Tanzania? How do you see that developing?
Now we are seeing some more improvement, but it's so early to look at that. But the arrangement of allowing processors to buy raw material direct from farmers has been a significant move, which has attracted a lot of players to come when they need to process. However, now we are not in a better position to say what will be the effect, but we are looking for that it will have an impact. Yeah, it will have an impact on the processing. We are sure that we'll be able to increase from the previous, because currently we were processing around 10% of the annual production. So this move, we hope that this one will improve. But it's so early to give the details. We are still collecting data. We are still monitoring on the trend. But we hope there will be improvement on that. But as government, we see that as a move, and we want to put even more effort to ensure that we increase processing in the country.
Yeah, I'd just like to say congratulations on making that move. I think that's probably one of the most positive things we've seen in the sector for a long time. And I know from my point of view, we're getting people asking us about processing in Tanzania almost every week now. And given the combination of the two things, the regulated sourcing from farmers or farmer groups, plus the increase in production, it would suggest that Tanzania is a great location for processing investment at the moment. Let's hope it takes off again.
Yeah, for sure. And the government is committed to support the processors. We are very much committed as individual and collectively. Even for investors who want to come here to process and export cashew to their country, we also allow them to enter into contract with farmers. So an investor can come here, can enter into contract with farmers in a certain location. Then we will allow him or her to procure all the RSN in that location. Can he process that cashew and can export that one to outside the country. So we as government, we are very much committed to improve that, because we are seeing that depending on selling RCN alone, we are seeing that with the increase in production globally, we are not certain if the buyers who are coming to buy RCN in Tanzania will be coming for the next 5 to 10 years. So we have to think on expanding the market of cashew. And the only way is to process our RCN. So we as government, we are committed on that, and we want to assure any investors who want to come to Tanzania, we assure them that we'll support to make sure they succeed in their mission.
I think we would all support that idea, and we hope to see more processing in Tanzania in the coming years. You've actually, a couple of questions came up in the text while you were talking. You actually answered them, so thanks for that. If anyone else has any questions on Tanzania, I'd be more than happy to put them to Francis Alfred from the Cashew Board of Tanzania. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Alfred. But there is a question on the other platforms. Here it is also laudable that there is a two-tier system which allows processors to buy outside the auction. But then the questioner wants to know whether this does not affect or will not affect the competitiveness of the auction system. Are they seeing any attempts by buyers to go through processors and to really circumvent the auction system?
Ernest, I could not get you clear. The sound is not straight, but I will respond. I don't know if it's right, but I was not getting you clear.
Alfred,
yes.
The questioner is lauding the idea that there are two different mechanisms for processors and other traders to buy raw cashew nuts. And then the worry of the questioner is whether this system will not affect the competitiveness of the auction system?
Okay. Ernest, I want to assure you, because now we are around in a fourth week, there is no, because we've got guidelines for those who want to export outside the country, they are buying through the auctions, and those who are processing the country, they are buying through the primary market. We call it a primary market, who are buying direct from farmers through the cooperative union called the AMCOS. And there is no complication, because farmers who have got smaller cargo, for example, who are not willing to wait to sell through the auction, they are allowed to sell to the local processors. And those who are willing to sell through the auction, they take their cash and they sell to the auction. The only difference is that those who are selling through the primary market, they have to negotiate with the local processor. And in most cases, the local processor might offer a lower price compared to the price in the auction. But there are those farmers who are willing, they can't, because they've got small cargo, for example. So they want to sell it through primary market. And for us, because we want to promote local processing, for those farmers who are willing to sell their cashew to local processors, there is no challenge on that. Currently, we've faced no any problem in the modality we are using. And the good thing is that the arrangement has assisted us to improve. There are those people who used to buy from farmers like middlemen and selling the auction. So this arrangement of primary market, in one way or another, is giving challenge to those middlemen who were procuring cashew illegally through farmers. Now farmers have got a direct way of selling. Those who can't wait for the auction, they don't need to sell for those who are buying illegally. They've got to sell now to the processor. So it's improving even the system of cashew. Because once they say to the processors, we are sure that it will have much more significant effect to the economy of the country rather than selling to those middlemen who were taking to the farmers and selling again at the auction. But through selling to the local processors, it has a much bigger impact. So to make it short, that there is no challenge, because we've got a proper guideline for primary market, and also got a proper registration for those who are going to process locally and those who are going to export. We've got a very clear guidelines, and also registration is distinctive in those groups. So there is no any complication on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. There's a quick question here. The questioner wants to know whether processors are also not allowed to export raw cashew nuts, just the assurance. Are processors allowed to export raw cashew nuts? I hope not.
Local processors who are buying through primary market, they are not allowed to export raw cashew nuts.
Okay.
And we can't give them permit to export raw cashew nuts. They will export kernels, but also because we are entering, we've got what we call we are signing a contract between local processors, those who are going to buy. And we've already inspected their factories, but also we are going to do monitoring. Any quantity which they are going to buy, to procure, we're going to monitor it in their factories to make sure that it's processed here in the country. So we've got a monitoring system whereby we keep on following up on all those local processors who are buying through the primary market to make sure that they do not divert that cashew and take it into auction to sell it as for export. So we are monitoring that.
Okay. So you've addressed some of the other questions that I was going to go on to. So now there's a question who wants to know what subsidies are available for setting up new processing units in Tanzania. Maybe if quickly you can touch on some of the subsidies or specific support that are there for processors, people who want to set up new factories, not existing ones, those who want to get into the industry to establish new factories.
Okay, first of all those who want to come to set factories here in Tanzania, we'll assist them to get land. If you want to put a new plant, we'll assist them to get land on where to put that plant. If someone doesn't want to put a plant, you want just to process here, we can assist him or her to lease a plant which is already here to process cashew. But also, as a processor, the big challenge as a processor, as you know, is availability of raw material. We've got that arrangement for raw material. But also, when you're exporting kernels, you don't pay export levy. Currently, for those who are exporting raw cashew nut outside the country, they have to pay $160 USD per ton or 15% of FOB price, whichever is higher. But for kernels, if once you have already processed kernels, you are given a permit to export it with no any other tax which is being charged. So those are some of the incentives which we offer to those who want to put plants here in Tanzania.
Thank you very much, Francis. A last question before we introduce another presenter from Mozambique. I see Lucia from Incasju is going to join us very soon. So, Alfred, the question has to do, it's a tricky one. You can decide it should pass. But then let me read it word for word. What is the level of independence of the Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania and the assurance that a disruptive interference of a few years ago cannot be repeated? It's a tough one.
Sorry, come again.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat it. The private sector, this is a question, I guess, from somebody who is an investor, and actually these are usually the concerns of the private sector. And I'm reading it. It says, what is the level of independence of the Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, I believe today, and the assurance that the disruptive interference of a few years ago, talking about what happened about 2-3 years ago, cannot be repeated? Okay. What is assurance?
I
know it's a tough one, Alfred.
Yeah.
Yes, but essentially, are there safeguards today against the kind of government interferences that we had in the years past, 2-3 years past?
Okay, that interference came because we found that the interests of the farmers were in a problem. And we did that at that particular time. And but now, as I'm telling you, as you can see, we as you remember, previously we were putting even what we called indicative price, but now we know that cashew business is based on market forces. We understand it very much, that cashew business based on market forces, demand and supply. So currently, we don't expect any government intervention in the business of the cashew. For example, if it could be so, as you can see, the prices which were this season are not very good. But the government has not intervened in any way because we know that those are the market forces and there are changes which are affecting that price. So we know currently we want to assure the buyer that the government will not intervene. The private sector is free to do business, and we are giving more power to the private sector. And for example, now, most of the processing is done by private sector. And we, the government, we are facilitating the private sector to make sure they succeed in processing their cashew. We are not government entity. So I'd like to assure the investors who want to come that private sector is free and there will be no government intervention for any reason unless otherwise.
Thank you very much, Francis. This was a tricky question, I must concede, and thanks for the assurance you have given. There are more questions here, but they have to do with Jim. So, Jim, I hand over back to you to finish with Mozambique, and then we can go to questions related to your presentation. Thank you very much, Jim.
Okay. Thank you, Alfred. That was really helpful and very much appreciated. That last question, you know, it's a bit unfair to ask someone who works for an agency that kind of a question because it's related to politics and government policy.
Exactly.
What we should do in Tanzania for now is look at the evidence before us. And the evidence before us is that there's positive developments for processing. There seems to be a will to develop processing as well as production, and the will for production has been there for some time. So let's see how it develops. But for the time being, it seems to be moving in the right direction. Now, coming to Lucia Antonio of Incasju from Mozambique, who's joined us at short notice and for which we are very grateful. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Jim.
It's nice to see you online. Thanks very much for joining us. Forgive me, I'm going to hit you with some questions now. We're trying to get an idea of how generally the crops in East Africa have been progressing. And I was wondering if you could give us an update on the crop situation in Mozambique.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning in Mozambique, and thank you, Jim. I'm a great fan of you. I have learned since years about the cashew international market and the cashew season in Tanzania. Following the Tanzania, we have Mozambique. Our season, Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
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 We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Thank you. Following Tanzania and Mozambique, the season will start, the official season will start in November 12th. And we will start in Cabo Delgado province.
Unfortunately, we've got some connection issues. See, I don't know if you can hear me, but we're losing you.
Our season is going to last for 7 months. Hello?
Hi, you're back with us. We can hear you again now.
Okay. I was talking about our cashew season. We'll start in November 12th around the country. In the northern region, we'll start in November and will end in February, while in the center and southern part will start in December and it will end in May. So the market season production forecast for this season is 160,000 tons, which represent an increase of 10% in comparison with the last season. Differently for the previous season, where was the heterogeneity in maturation of the cashew trees, in this season, the majority of cashew trees present a uniform maturation with low incidence of pests and disease. So we are expecting the good season for this year. Above the forecast, we have set up the reference price of cashew for this season, which is $0.7 US per kilo. We also have started with the auction following our neighbor Tanzania, and include the positive aspect of the auction. So we will start with small amounts. In Cabo Delgado, we will start at 12 November. Then we will do the auction for all the province this year. So we want to see the effort of that. We started with the auction last year, and it was a good experience because in Mozambique we faced the raw quality of nuts. So our average of outturn is about 46 outturn. But at the auction, we found out that we can sell about 48 to 52 outturn of raw cashew nuts. So that was a great motivation for the cooperative, for the production, even though for the processor and exporter, they were able to buy good quality of raw cashew nut. That was the advantage, and we were able also to follow up the restaurability of the cashew.
Thank you. Tell me about the reference price. You mentioned a reference price of US dollar cents 70 per kilo. What exactly does that mean? Is that a farm gate, or what kind of price is that?
Oh, the reference price is set up with intervention of producer, with the intervention of processor, and exporter doesn't have too much intervention, because we want to find a balance where we are not benefits only the producer, but also take it into account the processor viability. So first of all, we have to work with producers and have indicator of the international market, take into account the trend of the kernels, take into account of the cost of the production of the farmers and also of the processor. We use indicators, and then we have to set up a meeting of these actors where we discuss the price, and in this discussion we present the reference part, the calculation, the methodology that we follow, and we agree on 24 September, and we agree accordingly with all the actors that for this season the reference price is going to be 0.7 USD per kilo. But if in the international market the price will decrease, we will have to sit again and take into consideration the dynamics of the market, so that we can have a fair price for all the actors that we set. And this mechanism was introduction in our regulation.
Okay, that's interesting. And is the price related to a particular quality standard, or is it just all standards of raw cashew nuts?
Exactly. As I said before, our average of outturn is 46. So the reference price average, this 0.7 USD, is for 46 outturn. So you at the farm, at the local area in the farmers, you find the average. But with the ocean system, so we start with the reference part, which is 0.7 US dollar. But if we can bring into the ocean outturn above 46, 48, 49, 52, there is a price, and the calculation is automatic, and you can set up. So the exporter and processor can also buy at fair price. But mostly what we can see for the last season is the exporter are more fierce competition in the ocean. But that's how it works.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm really interested to hear you say that you're looking to find a balance between the interests of the producer and the processor. I think that's a very good approach. And indeed, you'd hope in the long term that the interests of both would start to merge and one would support the other. What about the long-term impact or the long-term progression in production? How do you see production over the next 5 to 10 years in Mozambique? Are there any figures or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. We are seeing the increase for, now we are talking about 160,000 metric ton. And in 2024, our progression is for 200,000 metric ton for 2024. Why we are seeing that? Because in the past, all the production was only rely on small scale farmers. And our biggest challenge is the raw cashew nut quality and quantity, because you have both exporter and processor fighting for the raw cashew nuts. So in this new strategy that we are drawing, we underline the integrated vertical production, where processor are linked with the cooperatives and this we have an example of Condor has an area of 10 hectares, and we want to expand where processor not only relying on buy raw cash material, but have also support to start with farmer. And those production on the farm on processor farmers, they have the best quality of cashew, because that is our weakness when the processor going to buy to the farmers. So we will have to linkage with the researchers, or in Portuguese is investigadores. So they have to set up a good raw cashew seedlings on those processor areas, so that they can follow up the production, the infestation of pest and disease, and even the size of the nuts, the outtime. So the processor, when they start harvesting, they know exactly what kind of quality and even the size of the cashew that they have to harvest, so that they have to reduce this challenge of quantity and quality on the factories.
Wow, that's really interesting, very positive. There's a question here for you. This year, what proportion of the crop will be sold through the auction? Is it the intention to sell 100% of the export RCN through the auction?
Oh no, Jim, no. We are babies on the cashew auction. So we will start an example, step by step with positive aspect. And cashew auction, you have to organize all the logistic. We have jute bags, we have to have a warehouse, you have to train the producer, and there is a reality in Mozambique or in Africa. Most of our farmers doesn't have
Okay. We're losing you a little bit. Okay. Maybe if
you see the way of paying the farmer. Now, hello.
Yeah, unfortunately, your connection dropped off there.
Hello?
Momentarily.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very well.
Can I?
We lost you there for a few moments.
Yes. Okay. I'll start to. I'll try to catch up. I will try to turn off my video. So.
Okay. Good.
So I was saying that. Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Most of our production of farmers doesn't have bank accounts, and want to have to explain the farmers the positive of the auction, because it's a new model of selling of trade the raw cashew nuts. So we will start step by step with small amounts. Not all raw cashew nut will be sold, and we will reach a point that we'll start step by step.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you if some more questions come up, but I really appreciate your joining us at short notice and giving us such an interesting perspective on Mozambique. So let's just look back and summarize over the two big producers in East Africa. In Tanzania this year, Francis Alfred told us that they're moderating slightly their estimate of the crop. They're still sticking with 280,000 tons as a working estimate, but perhaps there's a slight question mark over that. The auction is going well, and introduction of supports and a primary sourcing system for processors looks to me like a really positive factor. Long term in Tanzania, he told us that production is spreading across the country, and that will mean that we have 2 harvest seasons, perhaps allowing processors to source fresh raw cashew nuts for a much longer period throughout the year, with an eventual objective of about 700,000 tons production. From Mozambique, Lucia Antonio told us about the current crop estimated at 160,000 tons starting on November 12th. And like in Tanzania, in Mozambique, there's different timing for the harvest throughout the year. She explained to us the reference price, $700 a ton or 70 cents a kilo, US cents a kilo, and she told us how that works. Longer term in Mozambique, they are talking about increasing of production by 2024 to around about 200,000 tons. And I think what stands out for me in her very interesting contribution this morning was, one, the linking of processors to their supply chain, a key factor, particularly as demand for cashews rises. And secondly, the linking of the reference price not only to the market, but also to the quality. So there's a certain amount of flexibility in the regulation of the system. To you both, our thanks. And it's so good to hear some well thought out, positive reports on your countries. It's good news for the whole sector. What we'll do perhaps now is we'll just step back, have a little bit of an overview towards the end of the session, and then we'll come back to Ernest for some questions. So looking at the overview, I'm just going to finish up, give you a quick update on how I see things progressing in the market for the rest of the year. I think the RCN market, relatively steady, probably drops a little bit, but nonetheless relatively steady. Short term, I think the kernels market remains quiet. That might suggest prices drifting slightly, but I don't think there's too much downside on kernels prices. Freight costs probably stabilize, but the disruption will definitely continue for a long time to come. I think we'll see raw cashew nut buying from India quite measured. I think that we will definitely see some more buying from India, particularly at the Tanzanian auction, but that will be careful buying. Demand, as we've talked about, is strong. Buyers are well stocked, so they're not going to be chasing the market for now, but they will be back, and they do need. And the real question arising for me is that as we sit today, about 2% above the 2-year average and 16% below the 5-year average, how long can kernels prices stay at these low levels? That's the big question for me as we finish 2021 coming into 2022. And I want to finish my presentation because of the events going on in the UK and the climate change, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. I want to finish by leaving you with a few questions. We know how much climate change impacts cashews. Sometimes what we don't think about is how does the cashew sector impact climate change? And I think we need to think about a few things. You've heard this one from me before. About 1.5 million tons of raw cashew nuts, by the time it reaches the consumer, has traveled 28,000 kilometers. That's from West Africa through Vietnam back to the United States, that example. We have to think how that impacts climate change. Secondly, we have to think about the emissions from cashew factories. What are they burning? How are they burning it? How are they cleaning it? What exactly are the emissions coming out of those chimneys? Thirdly, where are trees planted and how are they planted? We're planting more cashew trees. What's been taken out to plant those trees? Are they been planted in areas where previously there were no trees? Are they been planted in areas where trees are being removed? We know that climate change will make more parts, particularly in West Africa, suitable for cashew trees. But when we plant those, what's coming out and how is that impacting the local ecology and particularly the biodiversity in those regions? That's something we need to think about. And finally, coming to byproducts, coming to what we do with cashew nut shell liquid and what we do with cashew shells, is the use of this product for fuel, is that really the best use for it? Should we not be looking at the production of cardinol, cardolite, and other valuable natural chemicals? Ernest, have you got any questions for us?
Thank you very much, Jim. Thanks so much, Lucia and Francis. Yes, there is a question for you. It has to do with the supplier behavior, which apparently is causing a crash in the kernel prices, and whether this is intentional and what can be done about it, because it's beginning to look like there is so much supply chasing demand at some point, which then allows or leads to the prices collapsing. So if there is a way that this can be addressed.
Okay, that's a question that's full of preconceptions. So let's have a look at a few of them. First of all, have we seen a price crash? Not lately. We haven't seen a price crash. We've seen prices, I would say, drift down a little bit. We did see two incidences of price crashes last year. One was in February, one was in August. I don't think that they were deliberate as such. I don't think they were necessarily market manipulation. I think one was a reaction to the pandemic. Bear in mind, when the prices in Vietnam dropped off, they hit $2.75 at one point for 320s. When they dropped off, the situation was that a huge amount of uncertainty. No one in the world knew what might happen. No one in the world knew the impact of the pandemic. So was it manipulation? No, but I think it was probably the use of a convenient set of circumstances to put pressure on raw cashew nuts prices. I think the second one in August, and more recently the sell-off during September, actually sell-off is the wrong word, the attempted sell-off during September. I think again that's more related to a couple of things like, for example, the lack of good market information, a lack of understanding of the supply chain, local tensions. We look at the Vietnamese sector and sometimes we think everything is perfect there. Well, it's not. And sometimes those processors have their own difficulties and their own problems in their business. Let me just interrupt, and Lucia is going to leave us, I understand. I just want to thank her and wish her well, and I hope we can invite her to join us again on one of these events.
Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I hope we also share the cashew market information in Mozambique, and we will follow up and we will share it. So we will start at 11 November. So we have too much time to work on cashew season in Mozambique. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So Jim, the last question I have here has to do with the projection you made on the increase in production in the Southern Hemisphere. I think you have projected something in the region of about 10% increase. And maybe those figures also will be revised given what Francis and Lucy have said. But then the question is whether this projected increase is likely to affect RCN prices this season in the South. And again, whether there is sufficient demand for RCN in the future to forestall any price collapse resulting from the increase in supply from both the South and then the normal areas in the North.
Well, I think first of all, there's no question of a price collapse. I think if we look at the Tanzanian situation, a crop of 280,000 tons or slightly below that is quite easily marketable and absorbable in the world market. Don't forget that in the past, Tanzania has had larger crops than that and marketed those successfully. So I don't see that at all. There's always a demand for high quality raw cashew nuts, particularly at this time of year. And don't forget, we've got a long way to go to new crop. The next new crop that will arrive in 2022, by the time new crop is harvested in West Africa, it'll be April by the time it can reach processing destinations. So between now and then, what will be available will be East Africa, then Cambodia, and Vietnam, of course. So I don't particularly see an oversupply. I think I will look again at my own estimates on East African and Southern Hemisphere production based on what Lucia has told us today. 160,000 tons is a big production figure. It surprises me. That would cause me to look at it. But do I see these two crops impacting raw cashew nut prices in a negative way? No, not at all. I think the auction has already told us that. The auction in Tanzania has told us that business is ongoing. I think what it may be doing is making the balances of West African stocks, maybe those in Vietnam and some other stockholders, it may make the prices of those drift down a little bit as better quality material, fresher material becomes available. But no, I don't see that at all. The question mark at the moment is the relationship between kernels prices and raw cashew nut prices. And looking at it today, that relationship is out of sync. But for me, I still think that that will be fixed, as it usually is, by a rise in kernels prices. And it doesn't take that much of a rise to do that. However, we live in strange times. You don't need me to tell you that. We live in unpredictable markets. But I don't think in the short term we can say anything is possible. I think in the short term, the market continues. There is underlying demand for raw cashew nuts. There's a long time till Northern Hemisphere new crop. So I would, personally, I would rule out a collapse in prices.
Thank you very much, Jim Fitzpatrick, and many thanks to you, Dr. Francis Alfred. There are no remaining questions here. So on this very note, we thank you for the input you have given us today. And our thanks also goes to our participants who have remained with us all throughout the session. And so we come your way next 2 weeks with the next session. And maybe Jim, at this point, probably even before we let you go, Jim, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Maybe you can give us a small note on what to expect in the next session on the 17th of November. So I just will pause with the appreciations and let you tell us what to expect on the 17th of November before we appreciate our participants and sponsors.
Yeah, so I'm thinking next time to talk about, we'll talk about markets as we always do, but I'm thinking to talk about this question: is high value addition the way forward for African cashew processors? In other words, should African cashew processors be looking not only at producing cashew kernels, but producing roasted packed ingredients and roasted packed, maybe even consumer packs? Why do I ask this question? Because I'm being asked it a lot lately. A lot of people are talking to me about, should we get into roasting? Should we look at finished products? And I thought that would be a really interesting subject to talk about, particularly as we come to the end of the year, looking forward to the new seasons ahead. So I'm looking forward to that 17th of November, the market and high value addition for African cashew processors. Thank you, Ernest. Thanks, Blessing. Thank you, Dr. Francis Alfred. And to all our participants, it's been my pleasure as always. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Jim and Alfred.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, all too soon, we come to the end of another encounter with Jim. We will come your way again on the 17th of November, as Jim has mentioned. Be sure to log in. Until then, stay safe. Bye-bye.
What do you care most when buying color sorters? What makes better sorting performance? What ensures high stability and reliability regardless of 1 unit or 10,000 units? Quality is all. Mayer's Smart Factory is built for production of color sorters and dental CBCT. The factory has completed its first phase construction and is the most advanced production base in the industry. Mayer Smart Factory started construction in March 2018 with a construction area of nearly 70,000 square meters and a total investment of nearly $45 million. It takes full consideration of resource conservation, environmental protection, and employee health and safety before designing. The factory takes a multi-layer framed corridor structure, making full use of natural ventilation and lighting. Also, it adopts first-class energy-saving facilities and environmental-friendly materials, making it a true green factory. With the construction concept of first-class equipment and technology for first-class products, Mayer's Smart Factory has built over 10 advanced production lines, including the flexible automated production line of dental CBCT, the color sorter assembly line, automatic circuit board SMT production line, unmanned maglev ejector production line, electrical box and sorting box assembly line, which feature high quality, high efficiency, and environmental protection. Mayer's Smart Factory delivers a giant leap in stability and reliability. Also, quality of Mayer products is fully upgraded, and equipment maintenance costs are effectively reduced. That makes customers worry-free totally. Quality is all. Mayer is constantly striving towards the goal of, no matter it is to produce 1 unit or 10,000 units, the quality is consistent. In addition, Mayer's Smart Factory has reduced material waste from the source for production and become more environmentally friendly, fulfilling Mayer's commitment to environmental protection. Also, Mayer's Smart Factory is an important part of Green Mayer, which advocates green design, green production, and green management, and gradually realizes the harmony between human and nature, and the harmony between enterprise and society. Mayer's Smart Factory is a big step in intelligent manufacturing, which guided by Mayer core values of pursuing quality and serving customers. Another intelligent coating sheet metal production base covering an area of 15 acres and a total investment of $55 million is also under construction. All we do is for product quality. Quality is all.
Fitting Cashew is an innovative program aimed at strengthening and growing the Beninese cashew sector. Its goal is to create a more productive, competitive, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth engine for the people of Benin. It's being funded by the USDA and is being implemented by TechnoServe and our partners at CRS.